welcome to the Kwak Brothers podcast. My name is Daniel Kwak, real estate investor and serial entrepreneur. Tonight, we are talking about interest rates, and I'm going to talk about three different things regarding to interest rates. Number one, I'm going to first explain what are interest rates and why do they affect you as a real estate investor entrepreneur. Number two, I'm going to pull some historical context on what the interest rates have done to dramatically increase or decrease people's business. And number three, and possibly the most important aspect of this podcast, how you as an investor entrepreneur could take advantage and produce income and create cash flow or amass wealth from understanding this concept of real estate. So I feel like this is a topic that a lot of people just get really confused on, right? But before I talk about this concept, before I talk about interest rates, I want to talk about a couple books that have astronomically helped me. And you know, they say that readers are leaders, right? I saw a picture on Instagram today, which, by the way, if you want to follow myself or Sammy, Sammy will put the links to our Instagram handle down below. I believe Sam's, yours is what? At Sam Kwak Official, right?
Yes.
At Sam Kwak Official. Mine is Daniel _Kwak, right? KWAK. So if you have any interest in following us on Instagram and seeing what we do outside of the business world or sometimes in the business world, feel free to follow us there. But, you know, I was looking through Instagram and I saw a picture of you know, some of the most successful people, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, right? And they were all, historically speaking, readers. Matter of fact, it says, I read a biography on Warren Buffett, saw a documentary as well, and they say the guy, to start off his day, would read 500 pages to start off the day. And when he got a little older, they were doing he was doing an interview with CNBC, and he says, well, you know, I'm a little older now, so I start off my day reading only 250 pages. And so for me, you know, I consider Warren Buffett to be like the GOAT, right? He's like the Michael Jordan of investing. And so if that's what he is doing, I really think that we should follow in his footsteps. And, you know, I always say success is universal, right? So if we take even some of the most top athletes who have ever played any sport, you know, you look at Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, you know, I read an article on Kobe Bryant saying that he took 800 shots a day, 800 made shots. He wouldn't leave the gym until he made 800 shots, right? And same thing with musicians, right? I mean, I would just read about articles of you know, John Mayer or you know, some B.B. King, right? Some of my favorite musicians growing up, and they would just practice scales on the guitar for hours and hours, really drilling down the fundamentals. So readers are leaders, and the first book that I recommend is this book right here. It's called The Purpose-Driven Life by Pastor Rick Warren. And, you know, I understand a lot of individuals who are listening right now, they may be, well, like, Daniel, that's not a business book. You know, that's more of like a, you know, life coaching type of thing. But let me tell you, I have met many successful people in my life. I have met millionaires who should have been billionaires. And these guys, I tell you, are brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. I see them all over. And whenever I travel to train on real estate investing, whether it's in Miami, Los Angeles, New York, I'll be in Philadelphia and DC in about a couple of weeks on a weekly basis. But the common thread between all those people is their knowledge was not a question, right? I mean, they were absolutely brilliant in terms of what they knew about real estate. They were very people savvy. They knew how to sell. They had every aspect of a phenomenal entrepreneur. But I tell you, the reason why they weren't where they needed to be in life was because of a personal decision or something that happened in their life outside of their business that affected what they did in the business. So, you know, I say all the time, how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? Your mindset, your attitude, and your heart's going to reflect whether you do business, whether you're in your love life, whether, you know, it's health, wealth, love, happiness, all the above. All right. So I highly recommend getting that book. Again, the book is Purpose-Driven Life by Pastor Rick Warren. Help you get your purpose straight to really clarify where you need to go. Second book, this is a real estate book. And I got to say, I've read a lot of books regarding the subject of real estate investing, and what I'm reading now is probably top 3, if not top 2, and it's Am I Being Too Subtle by Mr. Sam Zell. And for those of you guys that don't know Sam Zell, he actually made his fortune in my hometown of Chicago, Illinois, and to this, and don't quote me on it, but I believe to this date, he currently is responsible for the largest exchange in commercial real estate. And this guy, the timing was impeccable. Sold a majority of his commercial portfolio, I believe, right before on February of 2007, which for those of you guys that know what happened in March of 2007 or March of 08, we all know what happens there. And same thing, he sold 25% of his multi-unit portfolio on December of 2015, which we all know that's when the Fed started increasing the interest rate in December of 2015. And they've gone up about 6 or 7 times since then, which leads us to the topic of this podcast, which is interest rates. So first, what are interest rates, right? What are they? Are they, rates on mortgages, or are they rates on, well, it's kind of a lot of things, right? So, I mean, interest rates are dictated by the Federal Reserve, right? Which right now the chairman of the Federal Reserve is the newly appointed Mr. Jerome Powell. But the reason why interest rates are so important is because, well, that dictates how expensive the money is, right? So when we consider how expensive money is, and, if we talk about business or getting a mortgage or, getting any type of commercial financing, we know that the interest rate is going to astronomically dictate what your cash flow is going to be, what your borrowing power is going to be, what type of market or what type of properties you go after. So it is astronomically important. And obviously a quick Google search will tell you that an interest rate is how expensive it is to get that money, to acquire that loan, to leverage it, to get it into something else. If we take a look at what happens historically, to kind of refer my second point, the main reason as to why a lot of people failed or they lost their property, or I got to say, I probably meet 3 or 4 investors on a weekly basis who lost a large amount of their portfolio or got out of real estate after the recession in 08, right? And reason being, well, our interest rates are part of it, but the main part of it was the financing, right? They possibly over leveraged themselves, right? Or they've got an arm, right, on a commercial loan financing, and interest rates went up, which shot up the cash flow, right? Which made the money much more expensive, killed the cash flow. They were forced to sell, or they didn't have enough equity buildup, which is also dictated by what interest rate you have, right? So to kind of recap, interest rate will mark how expensive the money is. Now, let's take a look at that interest rate. Let's take a look at that example, right? And I want you to do the math with me here, right? Let's say you've got a $300,000 house, right? And this is for all you fix and flippers out there, wholesalers, right? And even some aspects of multifamily investing. Let's take a look at a $300,000 house. And let's say that interest rate in which you get it is 4%, which historically 4% is actually really, really low. If you look at what happened in the 80s, in the 1980s, interest rates went up to about 18%, right? And for those of you who are listening and you're higher in age, or I'll just leave it at that, you're probably shaking your head right now, nodding your head yes and no, right? Or nodding your head up and down because you saw what was going on. Now, was I alive during those times? No, but we have the internet and we have books to kind of inform us what happened historically. So 4%, historically low. So you get a house at $300,000, 4%, 20% down. All right. And now let's say that you get a house at 250 or even 200,000, somewhere in that range. Let's go with 250. And let's say your interest rate is 5% instead of 4%. Well, I'm willing to bet that your monthly payment is going to be the same. If not, the 250 with the higher interest rate, that monthly payment is going to be higher. So let's take a quick detour, right? And let's put ourselves in the seat and the mindset of a consumer. So I know every single person watching, you're an entrepreneur, you're an investor, right? So you're like, I'm not about the rat race or the 9-to-5 or the W-2, right? But let's put ourselves in that shoe. Let's say you make a very healthy $70,000, or let's go with an even number, right? Let's say you make $84,000 a year annually. That's your annual salary, which is well above the US average, right? And you're making gross about $7,000 on a monthly basis. 7 times 12 is 84, right? So you're making $7,000 a month and you get all your expenses. So you got your car payment, you got your student loan payment, right? And you have a mortgage, right? Which is a pretty big expense for an average American. Now, if you're an American and you're budgeting, keep in mind, most individuals with all their expenses they've got going on, a lot of the liabilities, a lot of Americans don't have a lot of money left over. So typically they're going to have a range, they're going to have a budget. When somebody's house hunting, the average, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, right? Or, David and Alexandra, who just got married and just graduated college, right? They have a certain amount of income. So one of the big things they're going to look for in a house is, can we afford the monthly payment, right? In their mind, through the eyes of a consumer, they're thinking, well, we want a house payment that's between $1,200 to $1,500, right? That's where they're going to start in terms of what to offer on properties. So if the interest rate is higher, that means that their monthly expense for that mortgage is going to be higher as well, right? Meaning that's going to drop down the purchasing power for Mr. and Mrs. Jones or David and Alexandria, who just graduated college, right? Who are a little bit more tight on money compared to entrepreneurs and real estate investors who can raise millions of dollars just like that, right? So let's think about that for a second, right? As you're considering yourself as a fix and flipper. That's why, whenever I meet a fix and flipper or a wholesaler, right, I kind of tell them, well, I'm a little nervous about the fix and flip market right now, just because the amount of people that are fix and flipping. But consider a situation where you buy a piece of property, the interest rate goes up 0.25% or 0.5%. That's going to automatically drop the purchasing power of your customer, of your consumer, which means overall that's going to drop the price in general, right? So which means that from the point you start your project to the point where you end your project, the ARV, which is the after repair value, may change astronomically, right? And if you look at what an interest rate, or even 250 basis points on an interest rate is going to do on a 30-year mortgage, it's an astronomical amount of difference. Same thing with commercial financing, right? I mean, if commercial interest rates go up, right, what's that going to do to the purchasing power of apartment complexes, right? To the real estate investors who go to the bank or go to the financial institutions to acquire properties, to acquire the loans and the financing to acquire multifamily buildings or apartment complexes. That right there is why I don't think it's a coincidence that currently right now, one of the most popular ways, or if not the most popular way, right? And I'm going to quote a research report done by Marcus and Millichap, right, the brokerage. Right now, 55% of all commercial real estate financing is done through Fannie Mae financing. And guys, I don't think that's an accident, because generally speaking, based on my research and the different financings that I studied, your Fannie Mae financing are going to give you a lower interest rate. Now, do you have a lot more hoops to jump through? Absolutely. Much more paperwork, right? I mean, I spoke with the broker before, and I almost got one of my projects in Fannie Mae financing. But just goes to show you that a lot of people are willing to jump through those hoops because of the lower interest rate. So here's a good rule of thumb that I've learned over the years that I've met with other investors. And, it's kind of a rule of thumb that I've shared and people share back to me just to show how universal it is. So write this down. It's 0.7%, right? So every time interest rates go up 0.7%, that's going to dictate the cap rate, which is going to lower the purchase price by 10%. And this is commercial buildings, so 5 units and up. So let's talk about the historical context of the interest rate. If we look at the U.S. economy, as a whole, in terms of what that does, what interest rates does to, people in general, or even your investor and entrepreneurial activities, right? We can obviously see that the higher the interest rates, the more difficult it makes to acquire the money, the more difficult it makes to acquire the financing, whether it be a startup company or whether it be real estate in general, right? So let's talk about what reasons or how that affects the economy, or how that affects, entirety in general. And this goes back, again, this happened in history. This happened a lot in the 2000s when residential mortgages were so easy, right? When the bubble was caused by the subprime mortgage market lending, which inspired the Dodd-Frank Act. Right, interest rates had a lot to do with that in terms of what happened, right? How out leveraged was the financing. So going back to the example, right? If the interest rates go up and down and money becomes more difficult, what is that going to push more people to do, right? It's going to incentivize, or it's going to push your consumers, your everyday people, right? Which is the mass market. It's going to incentivize them and push them to not acquire properties, to not buy a personal home, because they just can't afford the monthly payment. However, maybe they can afford the rent, right? So maybe they're looking at their budget and they're like, well, you know, like our budget right now in terms of a mortgage is going to be between $1,200 to $1,500, right? So the couple who just got out of college may not be interested in buying a property if the interest rate is really high because their mortgage payment's going to be really high. Instead, they may be more incentivized to take that same monthly budget money and put it towards a condo, right? And just paying rent for $1,000, $1,100, or depending on where you live, right? Where I'm at in Illinois and the parts of Illinois that I'm in, right? A condo, a decent sized condo, right? A 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo, that's probably going to run you around $1,300, right? I'm sure if you live in Tennessee or Charlotte or somewhere down south, that rent is going to be a lot cheaper. But do you guys get the point in terms of the relationship, what that interest rate does to the consumers, right? Now, let's talk about the last and final most important thing. How can you, as a real estate investor and serial entrepreneur, how can you make money? How can you take advantage of the interest rate? Well, it's pretty simple, right? You can learn ways to go around it. For example, one of my favorite ways to buy properties is seller financing. And the biggest pie that I love about seller financing, what incentivizes me the most to do seller financing is the fact it's not even the down payment, right? Don't get me wrong, the down payment's nice. It's a good cherry on top that I get to dictate and control and perhaps even negotiate how much I put down, right? But for me, it may not be that big of a problem because myself and Sam, right, we raise a good amount of money. We have investors backing us. So the down payment not be an issue. The one thing that I really, really, really want is the interest rate. That's the one, that's the kicker that I want, which right now the commercial financing, right, for commercial financing, the interest rate now, I believe, is 5.75% at the time of this recording. Well, compare that to the 4% interest that I get on my seller finance notes that I'm buying these properties with. That's a 1.75% interest rate, which if you look at the monthly cash flow, what that does to your monthly cash flow and also the equity buildup and you know how much you're getting total, how much money you're saving, it's astronomical the amount of money you save with a lower interest rate by utilizing something like seller financing to acquire properties. And let's keep in mind the benefits it gives to the seller as well, right? So that's one way that you can make money, knowing what the interest rates are by comparing it, using it as a negotiation tool, using that to get seller financing. In terms of a macroeconomic view, when you're looking at the concept of the interest rate, let's say the interest rates are going up, 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 and up, and up, and up, right? If that's the case, it is a bad time to hold properties right now, right? And now when I say hold, I'm not saying it's a bad time to buy a property and, you know, and rent it out and collect cash flow. That's always good. Cash flow is the lifeblood of your business. What I'm saying in terms of it's bad for buy and hold, and it may not even affect you, is that the property values are dropping because the money is getting a lot more expensive. So hypothetically, if you were an investor and you want to sell right now, the sooner the better, right? I mean, every single sophisticated real estate investor that has a massive portfolio that I've met is selling, right? The amount of $10+ million deals that I've come across or have been offered to me this past month, I've got more offered to me this past month than I have in any other month or any other month combined of me investing in real estate. So a lot of these sophisticated sellers are wanting to drop out because the interest rate's getting higher and higher and higher, and they're realizing the value of their portfolio is dropping, and it may not go back up in terms of value for the next 10, 15 years, right? And so if you're looking to get out of the real estate game, that might be a pretty good incentive, which if you're negotiating with a sophisticated seller, that might be a good way to push a sense of urgency if you want to buy properties, right? Or perhaps you want to study to the point where you study the economic trends to the interest rates stabilize at a certain amount a year. My belief, they might stabilize around 6%. But we may see perhaps in the future a situation where interest rates drop, which in that case, it may be a great time to buy properties because of what it does to the property value. So that's my spiel, guys. I don't want to get this podcast going too long. Again, if you're interested in learning more, hearing more, I understand sometimes it may feel like drinking out of a fire hose. But if you have any questions about me or what I just talked about, feel free to click on the link below. And of course, that's going to create a relationship where you and I can be able to have more of a conversation in terms of how I can help you, how my brother and I can assist you and add value to your business. So thanks, guys, for listening. Much love to every single one of you. Hope everyone has a fantastic 4th of July. and live with the purpose. And also don't forget to be bold in your business. All right, see you guys.